Matt Palmer from Latin American and Caribbean Regional Studies, presenting The Baptism of Science, Integrating Indigenous Plant Knowledge in Mexican Medicine, 1876 to 1914.
Hi, everyone. So, I'm sure that since spring is here, we're all enjoying some much-needed time outdoors, looking at the blossoming trees and flowers throughout campus. Today, I will also be talking about plants as I discuss my research into 19th century Mexican studies of indigenous herbs. Colonial scientific texts and contemporary indigenous herbal traditions were sites of a type of scientific baptism in 19th century Mexico, where medical students and doctors viewed such indigenous traditions as a valuable source of medical knowledge that, through scientific purification, could furnish uniquely Mexican contributions to global medicine. So throughout my research, the main research question that I had was, what was the influence of these older colonial scientific texts and indigenous traditions in Mexican botanical and medical research during this period? So to answer this question was a little tricky at first, as most botanical publications throughout the period are not very detailed, offering only a very general description of indigenous medical traditions. Now, in the 21st century, most medical students do not need to publish a thesis as part of their medical education. But in 19th century Mexico, this was not the case. Students were expected to defend and publish a medical dissertation on a topic of their choosing. With this in mind, in January of 2026, I traveled to the Palace of the School of Medicine in Mexico City, where I looked at pharmaceutical dissertations written in the period on indigenous herbs. I read such sources with an eye for how medical students and doctors were discussing both indigenous herbal traditions and indigenous peoples themselves. What I found is that such medical professionals paradoxically viewed such indigenous medical traditions as a source of their own professional and scientific legitimacy, while at the same time dictating their value through a lengthy process of scientific purification. Such knowledge was, of course, useful to these scientists, but at the same time, such indigenous knowledge was superstitious, requiring a lengthy process of botanical and chemical analysis to both redeem and exploit the medical potential of such indigenous remedies. So, with that being said, I think my research is useful as I think it can really express the process of scientific research in both post-colonial and non-Western societies. I think when we look at medical history, we can be tempted to view native medical traditions as being purely subjugated by Western medicine. And while there's certainly the case to a degree, I think the case of Mexico shows it's not always the case. Mexican doctors clearly viewed the value of such indigenous medical traditions, but at the same time, they also discussed these indigenous medical traditions through racist and paternalistic language of who had genuine scientific expertise. I'm excited for how this research can be applied to other aspects of the world, and I thank you for your time.